Please stand now for invocation. I'm going to give you the subject of grist for the mill before our invocation. It is on the subject, you may have heard, of the desecration of the statue of St. Anthony with the Christ child. And that was desecrated last night, sometime during the night. And so we wish to call for the perpetrators of this deed to be brought to divine and human justice, and that there be a swift revelation of who has committed this crime. There has been carved into the statue or written on the statue things like "Get Out of Town, Cult." And unfortunately, this statue was presented by those who are from the Philippines who are Catholic. They are not members of our church. So we will give you details about that after this, but I want you to make your fiats when I have concluded my invocation.
God that never fails, I call to the great causal body of St. Anthony and the Lord Christ. Even so, the living Christ child, the man-child in our hearts. Almighty God, we demand divine justice and thy divine will manifest here. We call for your divine design to be made known. We call for the exposure of the liar and the lie, and we demand the power of the Lords of Karma to deal justly with this and to show to us what is God's will and measure of this action. I call to the heart of God and the great central sun to send cosmic reinforcements for the deliverance of Church Universal and Triumphant and all souls of light who are accelerating on the spiritual path of the golden age of Aquarius. Almighty God, we call now for the binding of the dweller on the threshold and the judgment of those who have desecrated this shrine. Therefore, in God's holy name, we give our fiats together. Mighty Estrella, from the heart of God and the great central sun, settle the very cause for this Settle it now. Settle it now. Those lighting into the cause of the Those lighting into the cause of the Blaze the lightning. Buzz ran a bolt of the lightning. Buzz ran a bolt of the lightning. Buzz ran a bolt of the lightning. Blaze the power of Almighty God in the cause of the Blaze the lightning. Blaze the lightning. that came through, let the will of God be done. God is free. Cut us free, oh God. Cut us free, oh God. Light, light, whoa, whoa, keep your gun. Light, power of the Almighty stay. Light, power of the Almighty stay.
I'd like Monica McKeever and Michael McKeever to come and speak to us regarding this incident. It is Monica's parents who promoted this statue, and her uncle that selected a very fine wood, and he has worked on this statue for 2 years.
Hi, Mother.
Do you have pictures of the statue before it was desecrated? Is that it here? This is the first time I've seen these. And what is the change?
His nose was cut here.
You need to speak up so everyone can hear you.
We'll pass these pictures around, but when you look at it, you'll be able to see that his right ear was cut, his nose was cut. On his head, there are several gouges from a knife. In the front, across the cowl, is written "cult." There is a halo that was suspended from the roof of the gazebo, and that was bent down and then folded in half. On the back of the...
Is that it right there?
Yes, that's the halo there.
Mm-hmm.
There were several plants that were planted around the gazebo in the front and placed at the statue of the St. Anthony. Those plants were all torn up and thrown around. Several of them were thrown on top of the image on top of the infant. The infant itself was not marred in any way, although the saint's hands were. The back of the statue had written on it, carved into it, "Get this out, cult." And this is on the front, and that's the back. The gazebo itself was marred. There were several knife gouges and cuts. Several pieces of wood were thrown around that were taken off of the gazebo. There was a plaque in the front that was supported by a pipe. That pipe was bent over. The entire plaque was unscrewed, and that was nowhere to be found. They took some of the rocks that were a part of in front of around the flowers, and on the bottom stairs of the gazebo, they spelt out the word cult with the rocks.
I'll give these to you to look at while they tell us the story.
Hi, my name is Monica McKeever. My parents are from the Philippines. They're Roman Catholics, and I grew up a Roman Catholic. They're very devout, and they have a great devotion to the saint, Saint Anthony of Padua. I don't know if you're familiar with that saint, but my mom, and my mom's side, her mother, which is my grandmother, all the 4 children ahead of her were born dead. So they made a novena to Saint Anthony that if the next child would live, they would name her after the saint. And by some miracle, actually, when she was delivered, they thought she was dead. They wrapped her up, and then it started to move. So they opened it up, and she was alive, and it was born a baby girl. So instead of naming her Anthony, because she was a girl, they named her Antonia. So it was considered a big miracle in the Philippines in those days. So they had a very big celebration to Saint Anthony, and every year they would throw a big feast in memory of this miracle that she was born alive. There was one more child born after her, but was also born dead. So she was the only one who lived out of a total of 6 children. And she passed on, and the devotion to Saint Anthony and her side of the family, my mother's side of the family, was very deep and profound. On my dad's side of the family, there is a very old antique wood carving statue of Saint Anthony, about 11 inches high, and it survived a fire, an earthquake, volcanic eruptions, and several typhoons. And every time, the statue was never destroyed or hurt in any way. So it was considered very religious statue and item. So my parents, when they came here to Montana, they always prayed to St. Anthony, and the property that they were able to purchase at Maiden Basin, which is 5 miles north of Gardner, was through the intercession of St. Anthony, because they made a novena to him to find the perfect property to buy. So when they were able to buy that property, they were very happy, and they wanted to give something in return to the saint. So the first time they came to look at the property, they decided that they would build a shrine to St. Anthony. So this was a very big project that they worked on for a long time. The first step was, of course, to bring my uncle here, who's a sculptor. And he chose a very specific kind of wood, and he spent 2 summers carving it. And this summer, it was finally finished. And I could tell you that they put a lot of love into it. I don't know if you've ever grown up Catholic, but they're quite devout. And in the Philippines, they actually even, like for the infant Jesus, they would sew clothes like he would be an actual baby. They would take care of him like he was a baby. So they put a lot of devotion and love into the statue, the carving of it, the painting of it. They had a gazebo built, like a little gazebo house around it, and landscaping around it. And they dedicated it to their mother, to my mom, to her mother, and my dad, to his mother, in memory of their parents, actually of their mother. And so it was inaugurated a week from today. It was July 27, and the Billings Gazette ran a special story on it, which actually describes the statue and that they are Catholic. So it had nothing to do with our church. It was a Catholic shrine. The priest who came, Father Dale, he's from St. Mary's at Livingston, and he also covers St. William's, the parish here at Gardner. He came to bless the shrine, and during the blessing, a lot of Catholics came from Gardner as well. And he said that this is, in the Catholic tradition, consecrated for veneration as a shrine, a Catholic shrine, to St. Anthony. So it was a sacred ritual and a sacred event.
What happened this morning was when we were driving into work from our home, we drove past this shrine, and I saw that the halo was bent. And at first I thought, wow, the wind blew it down. And then I looked and saw that it had been bent, and as you see in the picture. And as soon as I realized that, there was an incredible pain in my heart and solar plexus. It was very, sort of like somebody punching you in the stomach and getting the wind knocked out of you. And that was my first experience with something like that. I had experienced hatred before, but never quite so close to home, even though in this organization we have been the recipients of that kind of energy before. It was right on my doorstep, as it were, so it was quite an experience. As you can see from the pictures, there was quite a lot of damage done. We don't know what time it happened, but it was obviously at night. The sheriff's deputy came, we fingerprinted, he took pictures, and we did his investigative routine. We expect that in a few days we may learn something about it. These kinds of things are often talked about. And you just kind of hear about word of mouth, who may have done something about that, who may have done this. After he had finished with his investigation, taking pictures and evidence, we cleaned up a little bit, and when I had stepped inside the gazebo to clean up, to actually take the dirt off of the statue and the flowers and things and put them back, after this whole time, it had been about 2.5 hours, and when I stepped back inside and was standing right in front of the statue, that same sensation came over me once again, and of this hatred and like a belly punch once again. And so at that point I stood, there was nobody around then, and I stood out there for quite a while and made a number of calls and fiats for quite a long time to deal with the hatred and the energy. What I had felt was simply a hatred against God, just a pure hatred. It wasn't even against me or Mother or the church. All I got was just pure unadulterated hatred, because this was, as Monica has said, something that was dedicated by the Catholic Church. It didn't have anything to do with us, but people equated it with us. They thought it was Church Universal and Triumphant. Nonetheless, this anger and this hatred that I felt was senseless, was ignorant, and very malicious. So that was my experience this morning.
So when I told my mother about it, she didn't understand. She thought it was against, they were mad against her and St. Anthony in the Catholic Church, which is partly true, but she didn't understand what the word cult meant. She didn't know that it referred to us. So she just couldn't understand at all. I think she still doesn't understand that it's against us, but she thinks it's against her and the Catholic Church. And my dad, when I told him, he said, well, he said, don't worry about it. I think maybe this is God's will, that things will come out this way. And he said, just let the authorities take care of it. So I think they're still in shock. They can understand why something like that would happen. They've been ambassadors and traveled all over the world. My mom was ambassador to France, my father to Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. He was the Philippine ambassador, and he had been stationed in China and Hong Kong. And my mom all throughout Southeast Asia. She covered Southeast Asia for 3 years. So they've never encountered this kind of hate that it's just beyond them. They don't understand it. And I called the Catholic Church, to speak to Father Dale, the one who blessed and consecrated the statue, because I thought that he should call my mom and comfort her about such a terrible thing should happen. Well, when I got him on the phone, he couldn't speak. He was like in shock. He didn't say a word. He didn't even say, I'm really sorry that this happened. He couldn't speak. He was speechless. The only thing he said to me was, the Livingston Enterprise called me. I've got to go. Goodbye. And then he put the phone down, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. So I told my mom, and she says, oh, I better call him and comfort him. He might need some comforting.
So that's all.
Before you leave, I would just like to say that I feel the very personal presence of St. Anthony in this entire matter, and of the Christ child. And a few weeks ago I had mentioned to you that I had seen this mayhem of the killing of the child. So last night I saw very clearly the intent of a death threat on a member of my family. And it was so real and so tangible that I simply went to my altar and made calls for quite a while to neutralize this, and resulting in the family member having only a minor incident as opposed to something that could have been worse. But I want to tell you about St. Anthony because I have not been Catholic in this life, although very, very Catholic in many previous lives. And I had not acquainted myself with St. Anthony, although I had many, many friends who loved St. Anthony. And so on the occasion of the presentation of this beautiful statue, this is the first time I have seen it, for various reasons, I think that the family felt that I should not be present at the consecration of it, since I'm not Catholic and I'm the leader of another church nearby, and that was the obvious thing for me to do, was not to attend the blessing of the statue. And so I read all about St. Anthony, and I realized he worked with St. Francis and with Clare, and that what he was noted for being the greatest expositor of the Old and New Testament. And this was only discovered after he had been a brother for some time. And one day someone was to give the sermon, and that one was not there, and so he gave the sermon, and from that day on, they had him doing public speaking and preaching in the churches non-stop until his passing. So this quality, not only of his being able to understand, interpret, and deliver the message of the Scriptures, but also his tremendous love for Christ and his tremendous desire to convert souls to Christ. St. Anthony comes to my heart and brings to my heart a tremendous flame of illumination. That's what I receive from him, tremendous Christ, cosmic Christ illumination. And so my idea would be that we look in our files or in the books of the saints to determine what prayer is associated with him, what cards we may have from the Catholic Church, to do a novena to him, because I always feel that the statue is the person. When I have a statue of Shiva here, it's Shiva, it's not a statue. Every statue I have, to me, is alive with a Buddha or whoever it is. And I will not allow people to be disrespectful in the presence of my statues. They cannot turn their back to a Buddha in my house. They cannot be disrespectful as they would not be if the Buddha were there in the flesh. And so I always accept this as my statues as being ensouled. And they indeed are ensouled, and they give me great grace and understanding, and I use statues for sustaining my communion with God in the many levels ascending to the octaves of heaven. So to me, St. Anthony placed himself over that statue, and as Monica said, that statue was consecrated as a shrine, meaning you could go there and pray to St. Anthony and receive from him blessings and healings and also the momentum of his causal body of preaching and teaching the Word. So I felt that St. Anthony came, placed his electronic presence over this statue, and allowed these, which may possibly be boys, because we've had boys do things like this already on our property and many times, that he came and laid down his life and allowed himself to be dealt with as you are seeing these pictures. His head, his halo, his ear, his nose, and the travesty of writing on his back and so forth. And that he is standing there for us, this precious saint. He is as alive to me as he was alive to me when I was Clare. And here he is standing for us today. And I'm grateful to know that the Christ child was not touched. Perhaps these children had enough respect for that Christ child not to touch that Christ child. But I also felt although I was not there for the dedication of this statue, I felt the presence already on that very day of St. Anthony and this Christ child. And I felt Anthony and the Christ child actually elevating the state of consciousness and the vibration from here to Gardner, from our church property, and who knows how wide the circles of his influence are. But that statue was really and is hopefully to be returned to being a true focus of what it is intended to be. And we need to protect that statue as if we were protecting St. Anthony and the Christ child in the flesh. That is what we must derive from this, that the saints do embody through either their signs, their symbols, their statues, their teachings. They are with us, and they are saints. And people ask the question, well, are they still a saint if they reincarnated? And the answer is yes. Many saints have been canonized, and a great deal in the early church, where we know that those saints have re-embodied. And it doesn't cancel out their sainthood in any way in that life, because they attained a stature of sainthood. So St. Anthony, for all we know, may be living in the Paradise Valley today. You know, we don't know all of the answers to sainthood, but we do know that no matter what religion is your background, you have to balance 51% of your karma. And that is sometimes difficult to do. As we've said before, you can't measure the quantity, it's the percentages. If you have 1,000,000 pounds of karma, then 51% represents a little over 500,000 pounds, or whatever you want to call it. So we could have great barrels of karma or small barrels of karma, but it's the percentages that count. So the 51% of the negative karma that you have needs to be balanced. So we cannot judge, we do not know. But we do know that when we pray to certain saints, and we all have a proclivity to some Western saints and Eastern saints, they respond. And what responds is their I Am Presence, their causal body, their Holy Christ self. And the aura of that saint living on earth sustains the fragrance and the grace of God that that saint carries. So whether you pray to Padmasambhava or saints of the Catholic Church or any church in the world, this is the great mystical body of God. And we are in heaven, we are on earth, and we are one. And God will work through us to bring a miracle, a grace, and perhaps understanding through this entire event. I ask you to pray for those who have committed these deeds. Usually they are young people in their teens or 20s. To pray for them to be delivered of the demons that have infested them, that have crazed them, that have made them commit this crime. We call for their conversion if their souls are ready to be converted, and if not, then we ask for them to be judged according to God's holy will. So this is an opportunity for us to work together to the end of the quarter to see what comes of our combined prayers on this matter. See what grace and perhaps further understanding with our neighbors, with the state, with the nation can come of it. And also, looking at a very realistic side of this, if we are going to be violated on our properties, on the ranch or off the ranch, this property is owned by Monica's parents, and it is an inn, then where can we feel secure in our persons? Where can we feel secure in our houses, in our homes? We don't have the money to hire security guards. We don't have the staff to put on duty to be security guards, to see who's prowling about our premises at all hours of the night. It takes an awful lot of security measures to cover a ranch that is this large. So it's by the grace of God that we are protected. I don't know if you all remember the story of the burning cross, but someone put up a cross that was not too far from ranch headquarters, but I think it was on the other side of the fence by the road. It was a large cross, set fire to it, got away, and right afterwards one of our staff members was driving up the hill and put out the fire. It was a windy night, and that fire could have spread to ranch headquarters, creating a tremendous amount of damage. So I ask you, whether you are near or far physically, to continue to call for our protection until ignorance becomes knowledge and knowledge becomes wisdom, and wisdom begets compassion. And people will remember that they gained their freedom and that we do have 4 basic rights, freedom of religion being one of those rights. Who do you blame? Do you blame the parents? Do you blame the militia people who are very fanatical in this state, as in many states? They won't have driver's license, they won't have license plates. They consider themselves citizens of the state rather than citizens of the nation. And they're extremely intense in their opposition to whatever they happen to be opposed to. So this incident you will find in all the Montana papers today. You may want to read those articles and see what our force of prayer can accomplish. Thank you very much, and keep us posted. Let us turn to our books. Can we take the next question, please? Do you know who is the next question? But who, does someone know that they have that? Here you are. Are you the next question?
Yes, Mother.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I have the question 35.
All right.
Yes?
Yes.
Mother, above all, I would like to tell you good afternoon and thank you for this opportunity. And good afternoon to all the ladies and gentlemen of the line here. And I could ask you if it is possible to play the song 7013. It has to do with my answer. If it is possible, I don't know.
What is the number of the song?
It's 713.
713?
713.
30?
13.
13.
13. Is Stuart is
All right.
Stuarther, please. And
some men who are stout-hearted men who will fight for the right they adore. Start me with 10 who are stout-hearted men, and I'll soon give you 10,000 more. Oh, shoulder to shoulder and bolder they go as they go to the floor. Then there's nothing in the world can halt or mar a man. Together, man to man. You who have dreams, if you act, they will come true. To turn your dreams to a fact, it's up to you. If you have the soul and the spirit, never fear it, you'll see it through. Shows them the way.
Thank you, Mother. Well, my question is, are you willing to look foolish as a leader? And my answer is yes, if. Throughout my life, I was aware that many things were wrong in society. I was looking for the answers, something to fill my expectations, because I was against the establishment. To raise my children was hard for me, because I didn't want to put them in the hypocrisy of the social play. Of course, I was ridiculed because I didn't want to follow the herd. When I was 15 years old, I listened to the song Stout-Hearted Men, and I felt the call because I understood the message, but I didn't find the strong man to obey. Many years later, I found the teachings of the Ascended Masters, and I began to study them, and I was very happy because the message of the song was becoming reality, step by step. The strong man became tangible, and my heart leaped for joy as a child with a Christmas present. When I was aware of the great treasure I had received, as a person who had been hungry for a long time, I wanted to share it. Then I felt that I could care anymore what people thought of me, whether they would ridicule me because of misunderstandings, of malice, of hardness of heart. I had found the strong men who I could obey. They were speaking to a noble and beautiful messenger whom I will follow, even if I received criticism and mockery. For instance, a few years ago in Hermosillo, Mexico, from where I came, where we have a study group, we have a seminar of the teachings, and some people took the brochures to the newspaper, and we were ridiculed because of the teachings. At the next day, some people found and mocked us, and thanks God, some others found it to congratulate us, although they didn't understand the teachings at all. This is my answer, Mother. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Did you decide the 10,000 men are 10,000 ascended masters?
Well, I think, Mother, that the strong men are we, because we are following the teachings. But first than us were the masters. They were two stout-hearted men. That's what I love very much. That song that give it to me a message when I was an adolescent. And I thank you very much.
And the Holy Christ self is also the stout-hearted man, too.
Yes.
It is a wonderful song.
Thank you.
Number 36, list 10 leaders who at one time or another looked foolish to the world.
Good afternoon, Mother. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. The first foolish leader that I chose was Noah when he built the ark. I think everybody thought that he was crazy.
It took him 100 years to build it.
Yeah, so
he was being mocked for 100 years.
100 years,
Yeah.
right. Right. The second one is Zarathustra, when he had the vision of Ahura Mazda, and then he started to go around and tell about this vision that he had. I think he was mocked by everybody too, but he had the perseverance to keep on keeping on, and then he got his first convert, and then he installed Zoroastrianism, and then Zoroastrianism became almost like the sacred heart of all religions, I think. Then the third one I chose is Jesus. I think Jesus was mocked all his life, and I think he was mocked especially when he was crucified. That was what was coming to me when I was putting this together. I think that the people that hate Jesus really had a good time when he was crucified. And I think that that's the most horrible and the most foolish things that they could do. But then another leader that I chose was Saul, when he was going one way and suddenly he was converted and he became the Apostle Paul. I think everybody mocked him too, from his old friends. They thought that he was probably crazy. Another one I chose was El Moria, when he was Thomas More. We saw the movie here, the first thing in SU, and for me it was almost like putting the train on the right road. He was perfect. He standed for the law of man and the law of God. For me was a teaching, because I have been struggling with the law. I have found when I have gone back to Spain that Spanish people have a lot of rebellion against the law. And if they see that there is a sign that you shouldn't do something, you do it because it's fun and everybody does it. You know, the people smoke in the subways, and there is a lot of accidents in the streets because the people don't respect the law. And then that was the point for me that I was falling sometimes in the law. Seeing this movie has helped me a lot. I like a lot how he did it, and he was able to die for a principle too. So I think he looked foolish to almost everybody. I don't think he looked foolish to his wife and his children, but to everybody else he did, but not to me either. And then another one I chose was St. Francis of Assisi, when he left all his wealth and all his family, and it seems like his family loved him very much, and he was able to leave everything and start a new way of life, and he made a vow of poverty. That was for him probably very important, I suppose, after he was so wealthy too. So everybody thought that he was foolish too. And then Saint Germain, when he decided that he was going to go and discover the wall, I know in Spain the people think that he is great, but not many people would still today do what he did that day. He confronted everybody. He had Queen Isabella as his helper. She helped him with money, and she might have been a very, very important part for him to just get out of Spain and have the money and the ships that he needed to have. And then another leader is Maria Montessori. I think that she also looked foolish to many people. She was a doctor, and she seemed to have been a very intelligent lady. I think she was the only women medical student when she was becoming a medical doctor, and then she decided to leave everything and started to go into classes where there was a lot of retarded children and try to help them. So she was foolish too. And then another person that I chose is you, Mother. I think that you look foolish to the world too when we were in the shelter cycle.
No, it hasn't stopped.
Yeah, but now they have no reason, you know. Before they thought they had a reason, I think.
Well, they think they have a reason.
Yeah. And then the last one I chose was a book, actually, that I read when I was very young, and I have read it several times, and still is a part of me. It's called the John Livingstone Seagull book. And I think that the story of this, I don't think it's a bird. I think it's a soul that is there, and this soul is able to separate from the flock and just try to fly higher and try to fly higher. And they throw him out, but he just keeps trying, and finally he's able to fly higher, and then he thinks that he's going to be alone because nobody else is up there, but he keeps going, and then one day his dream becomes true, and he finds his own teacher, and then he comes back and he teaches other people. So I like that a lot. And then I wanted to tell you something else. Yesterday we went on an outing, and we went to ranch office. And then in the middle of the night, last night, I woke up, it was 4 o'clock, and I couldn't fall asleep. I tried everything that you said, you know. pray and do the decrees, and I just couldn't sleep. So I was just thinking about Summit University, and I kind of, I was able to, I think I was able to see what is going on here. And what I saw is that we are a garden, and we are in a greenhouse. And we are protected by the walls that are around the ranch. There is like an invincible wall around here of protection that you spoke about. And you can feel it. You can feel it because sometimes you leave the property and you go somewhere else, and I feel it. I feel that I'm not in a dome, I'm outside. So we are protected by that dome, and then we are all flowers. I have seen that when the people came here, especially when they come here, because then you can see like the fragrance. There is something that distillates when the people come here. So I was sitting there many days and seeing the people, and then seeing the people outside is like you can see the flower better after the people is here. So I thought we are flowers, each of us, and we are here gaining the petals. Each of us is gaining the petals, and each of us has like different colors and different smell, but we're all flowers. And then I thought that you are the pruner and the fertilizer. You are putting so, and then there is a lot of rain. And I thank you very much for being here with me, and I thank you too.
Thank you very much. Now, are we on page 93? Okay. He called the question. At board meetings, after countless discussions and motions, someone will usually say, "Call the question, please," which means it's time to stop talking about the issue and take a vote. We love to discuss more than we like to decide. Jesus was constantly saying, "Call the question, please." A woman dreamed that she was being chased by a bear. When the bear finally cornered her, she asked in terror, "Are you going to kill me?" The bear calmly replied, "I don't know, lady. You tell me. This is your dream." This is a frustrating story for some because she was required to come up with the answer rather than it being imposed upon her. I once trained as a telephone prayer counselor for a rather progressive and upbeat church. During this training, we were told to allow people about 3 minutes to tell their story. Then we were to say, "Okay, that brings us to the question, what do you want to have happen now?" It is amazing how people will suddenly fall silent when confronted with their own point of power. It is much easier to whine than to decide. I suggest our telephone operators who answer these calls follow this formula. Jesus empowered people because he was willing to call the question, "Who do you think I am? Who do you think you are? What do you want? Where is your heart?" He asked question after question. Perhaps he asked so many questions because one of his mottos was, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." The truth is not always on the top shelf, front and center either. Sometimes it is wrapped in yards of our delusions and is hidden in the basement. 2 personal examples of this come to mind. Many of us remember the story, The Emperor's New Clothes. Yet every day in the workplace we let people run around, quote, naked, and pretend to admire the hat they are wearing. Wouldn't it be more loving to call the question? "John, I am sorry the report is not in, but is something else really bothering you? You have seemed awfully edgy lately. Is there anything you want to talk about?" Or, "Debbie, you haven't been smiling as much as usual. Is there something going on at home that is causing you to be unhappy?" Sometimes calling the question means taking the time to look into people's hearts. An example of calling the question took place recently at one of the companies where I consult. Through untimely and unfortunate circumstances, a man was thrust into a new position for which he was not trained. He hated the job, but he did not want to say anything to rock the boat. The group that hired him in an emotional response to his wife's death was so sympathetic they did not want to say anything either. Tensions rose until finally one day at a board meeting, the newly elected president said, "Bill, you really don't want to be here, do you?" At first, Bill obliquely defended himself from what he perceived to be a personal attack. As the discussion continued, however, the truth was uncovered. No, he did not like the job, but he felt they needed him. They in turn shared that they felt he was misplaced, but did not want to hurt his feelings. Meanwhile, of course, the office had become a hotbed of resentment and innuendos. One leader had the courage to say, "Doesn't this look like a duck?" while everyone else had been acting as if this were indeed a rooster. They gave Bill a generous separation package while they searched for a bird of a different feather. The office morale immediately improved. I am amazed at how often we honor each other's illusions. I personally know that I have done this. We honor other people's illusions about themselves and support their illusions, whatever they may think about themselves. Perhaps we are afraid of a grand unmasking. If one of us is forced to tell the truth, we will all be expected to reveal our true inner selves. Then where would we be? Free. At least that is what Jesus believed. The truth will set us free. Jesus called the question. What situation do you have in your office, company, or community that currently resembles a case of the emperor's new clothes? What obvious situation have you been afraid to bring to light? Could you picture the positive results that might occur when the truth is unbound? This is a very important chapter, very important. I hope you read it several times. You can ruin your life by not telling someone the truth and then getting involved with someone and deeper involved because you're not willing to tell the truth about how you really feel and what you really think of this person. He saw things differently. Jesus did not always perceive situations the way others did. For example, in both recorded stories of his raising people from the dead, the little girl and Lazarus, Jesus actively resisted using the word dead. She is not dead. She's sleeping. Finally, in order to communicate with the crowds, he acquiesced to their understanding of the word, but only as a frame of reference, so that he could explain and demonstrate the other, more permanent side of things. He saw beyond the current perception, and that is our only sin. We see beyond the current perception of religion, of planes of consciousness, of who we are, why we are here. And because others have not caught up to this, we then are persecuted. He saw beyond the current perception. Everyone should be doing this, and there are techniques that are taught so people can do this, so that you can perceive the consequences of your actions well into the future by asking yourself the right questions. Jesus said, "The first shall be last, and the last shall be first." This was another belief of his that showed he saw things differently. Whoever would be the greatest must become the least. I once challenged a church where I served on the board of directors to give money away during the offering. The premise was, if the church truly believes the principle of multiplication, then give the people seed money and ask them to multiply it and bring back the increase. It was an interesting experiment. Several of us on the board put up the seed money, which was distributed during the offering in small bills. The people were asked to take it, multiply it, and bring back the increase the following week. The result was triple the usual Sunday offering. The church accountant, however, had too fragile a heart condition to repeat the experiment. Surprisingly, many people refused to take the money, which may reflect how little we really are open to receive. A university experiment was conducted where students were told to either ask for or give away dollar bills to passersby. At the conclusion of the experiment, the students had received more dollar bills than they could give away. People were suspicious of money freely offered. Jesus was always seeing things differently. Sometimes we can see only the underside of the tapestry, with all its nubs and knots and mismatched threads. Jesus could see both sides of the tapestry, and he came to tell us how it would turn out. Some years ago, not too long ago, I suggested that people take, I think it was a tape on supply, and use it and see how they would multiply their abundance. One person wrote back to me, and of course they were supposed to give the increase on what they had accomplished by giving their supply decrees. And this person wrote back to me and said it worked and a great deal of money had come in, but he wasn't going to send it to the church because he was going to pay his bills with it. And so I thought to myself, you're being foolish. You can give away the golden eggs, but you shouldn't give away the goose that laid the golden eggs. The point here being that if you do a prayer vigil to God and ask God for supply and commit that you will give 10% or whatever percentage to a charitable cause, then when God multiplies your supply, you definitely need to keep your end of the bargain. What do you see differently, something that could or should be changed? What steps are you willing to take to make the necessary changes happen? My comment on those two questions is that you have to limit what you want to change and focus on what you want to change, rather than trying to change everyone, everything, and the whole world. Narrow your focus and see how much you will accomplish. He broke ranks. Jesus did not follow the crowd. He led it. He did not report the news. He made it happen. Mark McCormick, in his book, The 110% Solution, states that he does not think people should read the paper in the morning. He believes they are just getting information that is available to everyone and are therefore formulating their plans based on common knowledge. McKay says that leaders are responsible for having uncommon knowledge. He spends his morning meditating how best to serve the needs of the day. He reads the paper in the evening after he has done everything he can think of to do something noteworthy for himself, his family, or his company. In this country, negative information is free. Positive information you have to search for, or better yet, create. David had to break ranks to take on the giant Goliath because his brothers and fellow Israelites were back in their tents, trembling in fear. Finding this situation counter to all he believed about himself and his people, David volunteered to go forth to fight the giant. Astonishingly, it was his brothers who tried to keep him from doing the right and courageous thing. That's called family mesmerism. It was the same situation with Joseph. His jealous brothers threw him in a well because they were tired of listening to how he stood apart from them. Families have very strong corporate cultures of their own. and anyone who dares to be different is bound to encounter resistance. To Jesus, his family was not necessarily his mother and brothers, but anyone who did the will of God. In other words, his true family was anyone with similar goals, plans, visions, who was willing to act on them no matter what the cost. There are so many dysfunctional families and groups in our society today that a person must have uncommon courage to break free. Sometimes breaking free may require drastic measures and cause conflict. Churches can be dysfunctional. Companies can be dysfunctional. Governments can be dysfunctional. Laws can be dysfunctional. And a leader who is not willing to break ranks is not a leader at all, but merely a puppet set up to maintain the status quo. The Pharisees were dysfunctional religious leaders whom Jesus felt so strongly about that he called them whited sepulchres, broods of vipers, and other choice words. He had such strong words for them because they were supposed to help set people free. Yet instead they enslaved people for their own selfish gain. Jesus knew he had to step out of that crowd in order to set people free. He broke ranks. If you did what was really in your heart, with whom or what would you come into conflict? Describe the troops. Describe the troops that you are currently marching with. What fear of conflict is keeping you from being a leader? Some years ago, I went through a number of years of being very burdened by having been attacked by an individual who eventually sued me, took me to court, and it was a major court trial, and I was on trial for 8 weeks, and so forth and so on. So the outcome was not in my favor, and it was a tremendous burden to the church and to me. So one of the individuals who had initiated the lawsuit or had responded to our lawsuit eventually passed on. And that is available to everyone, and are therefore formulating their plans based on common knowledge. McKay says that leaders are responsible for having uncommon knowledge. He spends his morning meditating how best to serve the needs of the day. He reads the paper in the evening after he has done everything he can think of to do something noteworthy for himself, his family, or his company. In this country, negative information is free. Positive information you have to search for, or better yet, create. David had to break ranks to take on the giant Goliath because his brothers and fellow Israelites were back in their tents, trembling in fear. Finding this situation counter to all he believed about himself and his people, David volunteered to go forth to fight the giant. Astonishingly, it was his brothers who tried to keep him from doing the right and courageous thing. That's called family mesmerism. It was the same situation with Joseph. His jealous brothers threw him in a well because they were tired of listening to how he stood apart from them. Families have very strong corporate cultures of their own, and anyone who dares to be different is bound to encounter resistance. To Jesus, his family was not necessarily his mother and brothers, but anyone who did the will of God. In other words, his true family was anyone with similar goals, plans, visions, who was willing to act on them no matter what the cost. There are so many dysfunctional families and groups in our society today that a person must have uncommon courage to break free. Sometimes breaking free may require drastic measures and cause conflict. Churches can be dysfunctional. Companies can be dysfunctional. Governments can be dysfunctional. Laws can be dysfunctional. And a leader who is not willing to break ranks is not a leader at all, but merely a puppet set up to maintain the status quo. The Pharisees were dysfunctional religious leaders whom Jesus felt so strongly about that he called them whited sepulchres, broods of vipers, and other choice words. He had such strong words for them because they were supposed to help set people free. Yet instead they enslaved people for their own selfish gain. Jesus knew he had to step out of that crowd in order to set people free. He broke ranks. If you did what was really in your heart, with whom or what would you come into conflict? Describe the troops. Describe the troops that you are currently marching with. What fear of conflict is keeping you from being a leader? Some years ago, I went through a number of years of being very burdened by having been attacked by an individual who eventually sued me, took me to court, and it was a major court trial, and I was on trial for 8 weeks, and so forth and so on. So the outcome was not in my favor, and it was a tremendous burden to the church and to me. So one of the individuals who had initiated the lawsuit or had responded to our lawsuit eventually passed on. And this individual was apparently an enemy not only of mine, but of El Moria's and St. Germain's when they lived in England. But the funny thing about this was El Moria told me this little quip. And he said that this particular individual, after he had passed on, had traveled up and down the octaves of hell, turning everyone in hell against me. I slapped my knee, and I had the greatest laugh that I've had in a long time. So the point to me was that these individuals were already my enemies, and there's nothing you can do about enemies but love them and love them and love them. But this was rather amusing because it was so improbable and so absolutely out of my control. And this is what we have to look at when we have decided to break ranks, when we have decided to stand apart, face our cause, and go forward with it. So don't be afraid of hell, of death in hell, or the denizens of death in hell, because you have far more friends in heaven who can counteract that entire momentum. It was, to me, the humor in the case. The question, what fear of conflict is keeping you from being a leader, is one that we should all look to. You cannot avoid being a leader sometime, somewhere. You could be in a group of people, a group of friends, children, anywhere on the planet, and find yourself as the one who has the means to solve a problem, to act quickly in an emergency, to take care of this, to take care of that. You need to settle the equation of the fear of conflict keeping you from being a leader. Leaders always have conflict. I always have conflict. There are always people in conflict with me, close to me, far from me, here, there, everywhere. If you're going to lead, you will have those who disagree. So learn to live with the job. Because you are rising with your Holy Christ self to that position of oneness with the heart of your Holy Christ self, you will find that in situations, at work, at home, among relatives, anywhere you are, people will look to you, to your calmness, to your love, to your long-distance vision and understanding of the future. and you will need to respond. And you will need to respond because you are in constant communion with your Holy Christ self, and therefore when it is time to speak and time to give your input, you are speaking from a higher power. He came from left field. Jesus was not exactly what the people had in mind for a leader. Nathanael, a potential apostle, said, "Examine the scriptures yourself and see. Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Jesus was neither a warrior nor royalty. He wasn't exactly handsome either, according to some writings. He not only came from the wrong side of town, he came from the wrong town. The man nobody would have considered wore the crown. Nothing that the learned ones could decipher from their libraries called for a carpenter king. Once again, God played surprise. Few people consider themselves perfectly qualified to lead. We are influenced by the media as to what everyone and everything should look like. We know what Miss America should look like, just as we know what senators and CEOs should look like. It is easy to disqualify ourselves as leaders based on external characteristics alone. Yet we also live in times of great upheaval and surprise. Playwrights are becoming presidents, prisoners are becoming premiers, and women who used to serve coffee and tea now serve as prime ministers. Leaders are coming out of left field with a fresh perspective. Our passion may be enough to qualify us as leaders. Our vivid example of this happened recently in a professional association for which I was a consultant. At a long-range planning meeting, I led a visualization exercise where members of the committee shared their images of what was holding the profession back. Judy, who had long been on the committee, saw the profession as a knight who had been knocked off his mount and was struggling in quicksand. After the retreat, several people moved by her clarity and passion, asked her if she had ever considered running for president of the association. She replied that the idea had crossed her mind, but she had not given it serious consideration until now. Besides, the nominating committee had met months ago, and the roster of candidates was already confirmed. Judy's colleagues persisted, however, and discovered in the bylaws that she could be nominated from the floor. At the membership meeting, she and her cadre of comrades boldly proclaimed her nomination. For the first time, someone in the group asked that the candidates be required to give a speech. Judy presented her vision for the profession in a 5-minute speech, while the long-standing and approved candidates mumbled and muttered around. Judy was elected by a 2-to-1 margin, the woman who had not been pre-qualified by committee, but had been pre-selected by her own passion for the cause. The call to leadership can come from many directions and in many ways. I believe that the Old Testament indicates 3 ways that we are called to leadership: the burning heart, the burning bush, and the burning house. The burning heart is the kind of call that David had. He said, "I'll go fight the giant. It isn't right that our people should tremble in their tents at his insults." The burning bush is the kind of call that Moses had. It is a surprise approach to getting someone's attention. As you recall, Moses was called to leadership by seeing a miraculous burning bush. The burning house is the kind of call to leadership that Queen Esther had. Esther concealed her identity as a Jew, had become the honored and favorite wife of a king. The king got tipsy one night and allowed one of his devious advisors to declare that all Jews should be destroyed. Esther's uncle met her at the gates to tell her of the plan. He told her that if she did not reveal herself as a Jew, she and the whole nation would be destroyed. Risking her life and certainly her social standing, she revealed her identity to the king, who in an embarrassed fury hanged the man who plotted the Jews' destruction. Esther became a legendary leader among the Jews. She became a leader when her house was burning down. Nearly every leader in the scriptures had doubts at one time or another. They often felt underqualified, forsaken, or abandoned. Yet those who were called were given the strength to carry out their missions, then as now. Jesus was another one of God's surprises. He came from left field. In what ways do you come from left field as a leader? Which type of call to leadership have you experienced? The burning heart, the burning bush, the burning house, or all three? Have you? How have you surprised yourself and others with your leadership? He branched out. Jesus did not distribute his message just in his hometown. Jesus did not distribute his message just in his hometown. In fact, he left home rather quickly, recognizing that all too often a prophet is without honor in his own country. He took his message and he hit the road, going wherever there was fertile ground. He looked at the whole territory and saw it as a field ripe for the harvest. He quickly began recruiting workers to help him with his task. The importance of branching out is depicted in many beautiful stories and images in the scriptures. Isaiah encouraged his people to widen the space of your tent. Stretch out your hangings freely. Lengthen your ropes. Make your tent pegs firm, for you will burst out to the right and to the left. God told Abraham, I will give you every inch of the ground you tread upon, as far as your eyes can see. David said, like a victor I shout and throw my sandal over Edom. The entire book of Joshua is about the tribes of Israel branching out into the promised land. God does not seem to want leaders to settle for a little piece of land, spiritual or otherwise. The divine constantly urges us to lift up our eyes and see all the possibilities on the horizon, and to shake off the dust and ashes from our minds and feet and get going. The word branch or branches is mentioned more than 70 times in the Bible. Jesus himself was called the branch of the Lord. Leaders constantly must look for ways to expand their vision, their influence, and their contribution. There are always more possibilities than our eyes can see. Jesus branched out. What are your current mental boundaries? Do you have a territory staked out that you can branch out into? What are your plans for expanding your influence, your territories, and your contribution? He was bold. Jesus did not mumble or whisper his message. He did not discuss for hours the safest approach for doing something. He did not go through countless committees to get permission to make a statement. He was bold. He shouted, he stomped, he flung tables and chairs, he cried, he groaned. Everything he did made a statement about what he saw his mission to be. He crashed into people's consciousness with deeds, attitudes, and actions that had never been done, seen, or even heard of before. One could say he used his very blood to paint his message. That was how bold he was. Understanding that authority must be assumed within before it can be recognized externally. Jesus boldly took his authority. He did not wait until he had the total picture. He did not wait until there was a cloudless sky. He flew his banner high and carried it on a day-to-day basis. He took the canvas of his life and painted a message big enough, bold enough, and bright enough for everyone to see. He walked into the temple as a 12-year-old and started teaching. He stormed into the temple as an adult and turned things upside down. He called a spade and apologized to no one, not out of arrogance, but out of boldness and clarity. A magazine article recently featured the story of a couple who set sail across the Pacific Ocean on a small ship. One night a terrific storm arose. The ship tossed and bobbled, finally capsizing. The ship tossed and bobbed, finally capsizing. The woman survived to tell the tale, but the man did not. What is interesting is that the woman said she had sensed the danger and had warned her companion. He refused to listen to her, and the boat went down. In the article, she actually berated herself for not taking more power in a dangerous situation before tragedy struck. My life was at stake too, but because he was the captain, I felt it wasn't my place to argue too much. She regretfully said at one point, I should have been more adamant, I should have been more bold. Perhaps if I had been, the boat would not have sunk and there would be two of us alive today. What is the cost of timidity? What are the rewards of being bold? My dad used to say, he who hesitates is lost. My friend Catherine's favorite saying is, not to decide is to decide. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was warned by his staff that his plans to end the Depression were too large, too costly, and too rough. Well, he thundered, maybe they aren't perfect in every way, but by God, we've got to do something. His administration is credited with putting this country back on its feet again, all because one leader was bold. Jesus was bold. What would you do if you were 10 times bolder? Go out and do it. When and what has it cost you in life not to be bold? Let's take our next question.
Good afternoon, Mother. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to express my gratitude to the Masters and to you, Mother, for inviting me to Summer University. When I decided that it was time for me to draw a question out of the basket, I had an awareness that I was going to draw this particular set of questions because those were the questions I couldn't find an easy answer to during the preparation of the answers to all those wonderful questions. And yes, the question I draw was, which circumstances in your life remind you most of the balking donkey?
And what number question is it?
That's question number 37.
Thank you.
In other words, in which situations did I kick or just ignore the donkey that tried to keep me from doing something that was not in my favor? My conscious mind didn't want to deal with this because I didn't know the answer. So I made some calls for help to Mother Mary Kutumi Lanello and ordered my body elemental to go and find those file folders that were labeled donkey. In most cases that came to my mind, the role of donkey was played by the soft voice of the inner man. It was this inner voice that said, a long time ago, is this real love or just physical pleasure? Is this a relationship because you love this particular person? Or could it be just someone else, someone that could fulfill your emotional and physical needs? In the question lay the answer, and I knew it, but I didn't want to deal with it. I pushed the donkey to the side and continued on the road I was going. During the time I was studying physical education in the late 60s and early 70s, I met a girl and I fell terribly in love with her. She had a special kind of twinkle in her eyes that made my heart burn. But after a while she decided that she wanted a relationship with someone else. My heart was broken and I think I had a lot of self-pity at the time. I cried my eyes out. Almost a year later I started a friendship with one of the girlfriends of this girl that had set my heart afire. She became a good friend. She moved to the city where I lived, we started a relationship, and we married. The donkey balked again and again. Do you really love her? Or do you just want to be taken care of? I had my doubts, but I didn't dare to say no. I didn't dare to say, I like you very much, but getting married might be not such a good idea. And there comes the main issue, communication. I had trouble communicating my true feelings. I didn't dare to tell her. I didn't dare to tell her about my doubts. I didn't dare to tell her what was really going on inside of me. I only showed the outside. Everything was well. So we got married, and during my marriage, I was always looking for that other pair of eyes, those twinkling eyes that could set my heart afire. And of course, I didn't tell anyone. Then my wife became the balking donkey in a number of situations. She proposed, for instance, to get marriage counseling, but I still didn't want to see the real issues. I was afraid to go to the core of the problem. My emotional problems, my communication problems, all those things that I had hidden away, deep away. This doesn't mean we had a very bad marriage, but it wasn't very good either. It had its ups and downs. There were periods that my wife became very depressed and I couldn't help her. Our marriage came to an end on winter solstice 1992 when we decided to go our own way. The good thing that came out of this is that I have learned some valuable lessons. First, communication is the key. Communication is your higher self, the small inner voice, and don't ignore it. Communication with your partner, your children, your friends. Second, being married means hard work. I liked being married, but I avoided the hard work. I know better now. And third, dealing with the real issues of life is suffering. And love is suffering. So dealing with the real issues of life is love. Love for the partner, love for my own soul, that needs resolution of my psychological problems. Question 38. When has a balking donkey actually protected you? I was a teacher in physical education in my native country, Holland. I taught at a vocational school to mainly boys aged 12 to 18. It was not always easy. I found I was often more playing policeman than teacher. And since I had problems with communication, I didn't handle the problems always in the correct way. After about 10, 12 years of teachings, I got ill several times a year for longer periods of time. That was the donkey. It didn't want to go further. I, of course, first didn't listen to the message. Illness hadn't anything to do with my work or with my communication problems. It was just the body that had some problems. But the medical doctors couldn't find a reason for my illness. I was not supposed to be sick. So it was probably all in my head. They couldn't do anything for me. So I had to figure it out myself. So I started to look for alternatives. I started reading about alternative healing methods, alternative ways of thinking, reincarnation, and then everything fell in place around the same time. I decided to study homeopathy as an alternative for my teaching job. I found the teaching of the Ascended Masters, or better, they found me in 1986, and I decided to immigrate to Canada because Saint Germain had called me. Well, here I am, as your student, living in North America and practicing homeopathy, because the donkey didn't want to go any further. Praise God. The message for me of this assignment is that when you can tell this whole story to you, my friends here, I will be able to communicate with everyone else, including a partner, my children, my friends, and they don't have to be afraid to talk about my real feelings. I know I still have a long way to go, but by the grace of God, I'm learning.
We're very grateful for your being so open about your life, because our lives parallel one another's, and we all have had similar circumstances. And it helps the entire audience to hear one person's story. You know that you're not alone, and you can gain insight and hasten and shorten the days for yourself by learning things that you then don't have to go through yourself, because you learn them from others' victories or others' mistakes. So it's a wonderful tribute to your bonding with each other and to your feeling free to talk with one another about such deep things in your lives. So thank you again, and we would like to have the next question.
Boa tarde, Mother. Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, Mother. Good afternoon, everybody.
Eu estou muito feliz de estar aqui.
I'm very happy to be here.
Meu nome é Ruth Ferraz.
My name is Ruth Ferraz,
Eu venho da cidade de São Paulo,
and I come from São Paulo,
Brasil.
Brazil.
O Brasil é um país muito lindo e rico,
Brazil is a very beautiful and rich country,
e eu convido todos para conhecê-lo,
and I invite you all to come there and know it.
principalmente os norte-americanos,
Most of all, the North American people,
para que possamos fazer um intercâmbio
so that we can have an interchange
entre a América do Norte
between North America
e a América do Sul,
and South America,
e fazer o 8.
and to make the figure eight flow.
A pergunta que ficou designada a mim,
My question is
39.
39.
Você tem algum compromisso apaixonado com uma causa?
Do you have a passionate commitment to a cause?
Sim, eu tenho alguns compromissos.
Yes, I have some commitments.
O meu primeiro compromisso
My first commitment
é com o reino de Deus e a sua justiça.
is with the kingdom of God and its justice.
O reino de Deus para mim
For me, the kingdom of God
é um estado de consciência
is a state of consciousness,
onde se tem a percepção crística
or we have the Christ perception
de que Deus é tudo em todos
that God is all in all,
e de que Ele é amor e vida
and that He is love and life
e que flui em tudo.
that flows in everything.
Meu segundo compromisso
My second commitment
é com meu Santo Cristo pessoal,
is with my Holy Christ self,
de manter meus 4 corpos inferiores purificados,
to maintain my 4 lower bodies purified,
para que a sua energia possa se expressar em mim.
so that the energy may express and flow in myself.
Meu terceiro compromisso
My third commitment
é com a chama da vida,
is with the flame of life
que arde na câmara secreta do meu coração,
that burns in the secret chamber of my heart,
de fazer com que ela
and to make that it pulsates
pulse cada vez mais forte
and expand
e que se expanda,
each time stronger,
para que a árvore da vida frutifique na minha consciência
so that the tree of life may fructify in my
e
consciousness
se expanda para o mundo.
and may expand to the world.
Então, resumi esses 3 compromissos em uma oração.
So I put all these 3 commitments in a prayer.
Que o reino de Deus
May the kingdom of God
se manifeste aqui e agora,
manifest here and now,
pois o amor e a vida
because love and life,
pulsam no meu
they
coração
pulsate in my heart
e expandem a minha
and may expand
consciência.
my consciousness.
E eu sou
And I am
eu sou o Cristo
I am
vivente.
the living Christ.
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your next question, please.
Good afternoon, Mother. Good afternoon, everyone. My question is, how do you show your commitment? I feel that I need to thank my soul for yesterday she ran to the front and she snatched the question out of the basket before I even had time to think about it. So here I am with the most difficult question I could get. For me, art and spirituality are the most important things in my life. So I ask myself, how do you show your commitment on the path? And I had to come up with this terrible answer, I don't. And to find the answer to that one, I had to go back into the 80s, where I was still committed. And I asked myself, why was I committed then and not now? So I really had to do some soul searching to get to the answer. I came into the teaching in 1982. It was like a big jump start, and everything went really fast. After 1 month, I was together with my husband.
I was already conducting the study group of Gothenburg, and after 3 months in the teaching, I went on this famous 6-week stump tours that we used to have, going through Sweden, covering almost all the cities in Sweden and Norway, Oslo. No sleep, little food, and the car breaking down all the time. And in 1984, I went to SU level 1. As I had finished this SU quarter, I was asked, my husband and I were asked by the leader in Sweden at that time, and the Keepers of the Flame in Sweden, to return to Sweden and to take care of all outreach in half of Sweden, the southern part of Sweden, and to re-establish or establish the Malmö study group. Malmö is a city in the very south of Sweden. So May 1, 1995, we went off with kind of split feelings. Actually, it was my husband who had the split feelings because, imagine we had just made it to America and we were asked to go back to Sweden. But I was in Rome 1993. And on my birthday, I was asking Saint Germain to show me what I was supposed to do in my life. And during the night, he gave me this vision of light bearers, a lot of light bearers in Sweden, all over in Sweden. But he particularly showed me the situation in the underground railway. And I saw people were almost asleep, like under anesthetic, not aware, really like gone in a way, but they were all light bearers. And I got the message to wake them up. So I kind of knew what I had to do as we went back to Sweden. So my husband and I, we established study groups in different cities in southern Sweden. And we went stamping in all the cities. And we had weekend seminars every month, and it was really full speed. And we didn't even go for a swim, Malmö is by the ocean, and now afterwards I think it was a little overambitious, but we didn't go for a swim the whole summer, we were just working all the time. And it was a great joy, actually. And so we conducted 4 services every week. In the beginning it was just my husband and me and one person that came in by the first stump lecture. And he ended up being stuck by the AV for the next 2 years. There hadn't been an ascension service given for 5 years in Malmö. So we decided that we wanted to begin with the ascension services in Malmö. And I happened to conduct the service the first time we gave it. And I was kind of joyous and optimistic, and so I didn't make the call for all the discarnates from the past month or week to be taken to the service so that we could cut them loose and set them free. But I asked for all souls who had passed on for the last 5 years, And I just felt like how I went like a rock. And my husband afterwards, he really told me, you could have killed us all, And another time, it was really wonderful times. Another time was we gave weekend seminar upon the exposé on rock music. And it was so exciting. Everybody was just in their seats, and my husband and I, we had been working really hard for weeks to put this up. And as we needed a break, so we offered a break, so now it's time for a break and it's 12 o'clock. But nobody wanted a break. It was so interesting. Everybody wanted a break now, please. So we just went on all day long and all the afternoon into 12 o'clock in the night with all these wonderful people going through the seminar without a break. It was the only seminar I ever experienced without breaks. So I guess this, all this outreach, it was like a magnet to the people in the area, and former Keepers of the Flame, they came back, who had left the teaching for for some reason, they came back, many of them, and new people, a lot of new people came in. And we even found a perfect place for a live-in study group. So we were 8 keepers of the flame moving into a huge house with a wonderful church and big kitchen and single rooms for everybody, actually. And this just worked great for 2 years, and it was just a sheer joy to be serving. And even people from other cities begin to come, and Keepers of the Flame from Denmark came over to our seminars.
Could you condense the remainder of what you're going to say a little bit?
Yeah, I'm already going towards the end. And so I asked myself afterwards, everything was kind of at its best, and then it said suddenly from outside this group, like people from outside, a lot of envy and jealousy set in, and I guess like the devil saw its chance or his chance and began to push the buttons. So suddenly there was a lot of divide and conquer tactics, and I could actually see the karma descending between me and one keeper of flame who lived outside the focus. And I saw the danger of a split in the group, but I didn't really pay enough attention. So all of hell broke loose suddenly. It was kind of, everybody's electronic belt substance was just boiling. And there was a lot of lies and persecution and secret meetings, and I couldn't really sleep for half a year. So yesterday, as I was thinking of this question, I realized that my soul was really deeply hurt through these incidents that were going on for quite half a year. And she kind of shut herself off. And I mean, she had been wide open, trusting, joyous, and serving all the time. And all these things that happened, I suddenly kicked and hit and hurt. So she shut up as an oyster. And I came into this kind of feeling that never again lead a possession. Although another way, I kept telling myself that don't be a fool, Agneta, and you're really a coward. It happens to everybody sometime. But my soul even closed more, and I wasn't willing anymore to serve. So we made it here to the Freedom 1997, and then my husband and I, we moved to another city in Sweden, and we started a new study group, a small one, but it was all kind of half-heartedly after this incident then. And I began to work as an artist again, that's my profession, and earn a lot of money. We were in these shelter cycles, and my husband went to the university and supported us. So I did some outreach all the time, but I wasn't really there with my heart. And I had constantly this bad conscience about it. Tried to push myself, but it didn't work somehow. So I realized yesterday that I should have listened to my soul and comforted my soul. I didn't have the understanding to that time, so I just kind of blamed myself and blamed my soul, I guess, or whole on me. And it didn't get to anything. So I love being an artist, and I'm really committed in that regard, and I would really love help bringing in the New Age art. And Paul the Venetian said in the dictation, like I think it was in 1976, that the New Age art which ought to be formless. And I think this is really interesting to me and a great challenge. But I need that I'm healing my soul actually now, especially here at SU. And I feel I'm ready to show my commitment on the path again. I just don't know how. So I have the green card now, and I already entering a kind of re-entering visa and extension. And I'm in America now. But I feel there's some kind of a missing link in my life, art and something else. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So maybe I'm going to ask you later on in this quarter, if I may.
I can give you a counsel in general for everyone.
Thank you.
And you can stand there while I just say a few words. it really is important to follow your highest dream and not 4 steps down. To take the highest vision that you have and go for it, not the lesser vision. Because God in you is capable of anything. So we'll have the opportunity to do cyclopeas at various speeds for all of you who are here. Doing a novena to cyclopea is very important in the quarter because it opens your eye and lets you see what you should be doing. We know that the soul is not immortal, the soul is mortal. We are the parents and teachers of our souls. So we have to bring our souls along. Our souls are, they're like a barometer as to how well or unwell we are. So we have to bring our souls to wholeness and take our souls on the path that is the highest path. We only have so many years or decades left, all of us. We can, each of us, count our options of how many years we will be on the planet. And in those years, you want to do the most for whom? You want to do most for the people who are spiritual, who have a certain amount of enlightenment, but have not made the contact. And unless they do make the contact, they will not make their ascension in this life unless they are already saints by other past dispensations. So when in doubt, take the highest calling and go for it. Take the calling that will help the most people, that will satisfy and fulfill and bring to wholeness your own being, your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul, all of you as one. Take that path and you will have the right path.
Thank you.
Does someone just have a question that you would like to ask me that is not one of the questions in the book that would benefit everyone? All right. You have to take the mic.
Hi, Mother. Hi, everyone. What is the most important thing I can do to become a candidate for the Ascension?
That answer has many parts, and the first part of the answer I just gave you. I will state it again because it sounds simple, but it is profound. Unless you climb the highest mountain and reach the farthest star, you will not have fulfilled your potential. You don't want to qualify for the 51% balancing of your karma and be at a level of mediocrity. You want to be at a level of excellence. So you have to tap the resources of your causal body, your holy Christ self, your soul, all the experiences you've had, positive and negative, in all past lives and ages. You have to know what you're capable of, and don't take 2 steps backwards and say, well, I could do that, but it's too much work, too much energy. I would have to give my entire life to this cause. Don't make the mistake of stepping backwards down to an easier path. Take the most challenging path, but one that you can master, one that you can do, and then give it all of your life, all of your love, all of your soul, all of your commitment, and obey all the commandments, embody the virtues, all these other things that come along with it. If you don't reach for your highest, you will not feel fulfilled. You will not have accomplished what you could accomplish for the Ascended Masters, for your soul, or for the people of planet Earth. Don't choose a lesser calling. Choose your highest calling and go for it, whatever it is. That's how you can make your ascension in this life.
Thank you.
I'd like to take another one of the readings at this point. He boiled it down. The Pharisees came to Jesus and said, "Summarize for us the laws of the prophets. Which law is the most important?" They expected to trick him, thinking he would surely misquote at least one of the thousands of laws and scriptures that had accumulated up to that time. He looked at them and said, "The laws boil down to this one: love God with all your heart and mind and soul, and your neighbor as yourself." He distilled thousands of teachings, writings, and theories into one sentence. He boiled it down. If people could understand their core values, they would save years of doubt, confusion, and misplaced energy as they try to find direction for their lives. Jesus essentially said, if you want to be happy, do these things. Advertisers are paid to pare things down to their essence. Take the Nike advertising campaign, for example. All of Nike's factories, sales representatives, products, energies, costs, profits, and purpose were boiled down by their ad agency into 3 words: just do it. The agency created an award-winning and sales-increasing campaign based on 3 simple words: just do it. My friend and associate Sally Skaman admonishes the people who report to her to be bright, be brief, and then be gone. The essence of everything the United States stands for can be boiled down to one word: freedom. We have spent the last 200 years trying to perfect, define, protect, understand, and implement that word. Leaders identify, articulate, and summarize concepts that motivate others. Most important, they boil concepts down to an understandable idea. Jesus boiled it down. If you had to boil down your message, what would it be? How could you cut some of the fat out of your words and deeds? Save a lot of time if you do it. He was visible. Jesus was God's love made visible, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus spoke out from the mountaintops. He did not mutter in the valleys. He spoke in synagogues, streets, temples, gardens, and at every party he went to. He was not afraid to stand out in a crowd. When the Roman soldiers, uncertain of which man they were to grab, arrested all the disciples, Jesus stepped forward and said, "I'm the one you're looking for. Let these others go." He was willing to be God's lightning rod. I wrote a cartoon strip for a couple of years called String Bean. One of the cartoons I drew showed 2 earthworms deep underground talking to each other. One of them says, "Hey, Mortimer, have you ever raised your head to look around out there?" The other one says, "Nope. I was taught that he who takes a look gets the hook." "Yeah," Mortimer echoes, "me too. I learned that he who takes a peek gets the beak." After a pause, Mortimer mumbles through his wall of dirt, "Lovely day, isn't it?" The point is that the earthworms had no idea what kind of day it was because they chose to stay entombed and keep a low profile. Leaders cannot keep a low profile. If you want to keep a low profile, you're giving up the first ray of your leadership. Somebody needs you as a leader. Start with those in your household. D.L. Moody was one of the greatest evangelists who ever lived. He drew crowds of tens of thousands of people every time he spoke.
Once, when someone asked him how he could be such a powerful speaker, he said, "Before I speak, I just go out to an open place and say, 'Lord, set me on fire.' A light should be set on a hill, not hidden under a bushel. Jesus was not a low-profile person. He was visible. How are you visible as a leader? What are 10 new ways you could increase your visibility?" It's a funny thing, you know, they say that any news is good news. Any publicity is good publicity, even if it doesn't sound very good to you. I think El Moria must be our PR man, because he has kept us in the news for years and years and years. Always kept us right there with a high profile. No other church in this state gets the kind of coverage that we get. And we get a lot of good coverage. You know, it's not all bad. But what other churches are you reading about in the Montana newspapers? He was willing to do an end run. As quarterback, Jesus knew his game plan could not be to take the truth up the middle. Perhaps he would have preferred to have his message delivered through the Levites and the Pharisees. They already had their distribution mechanisms in place. That way was blocked, however, so Jesus did an end run. He hired the fishermen. Leaders often must use innovative means to deliver a message or accomplish a goal. One of the stories in the Old Testament that most impressed me in terms of ingenuity was that of Absalom, a son of King David who had fallen into disgrace. David was so upset with the young man that he refused even to see him. This went on for some time, and Absalom became more and more desperate to see his father. Still, the guards would not let him in. Finally, Absalom announced, "If he will not hear me, I will set his fields on fire." Sure enough, Absalom set the fields ablaze. Not until then did David recognize how much he had hurt his son with his unforgiveness, and the two were reconciled. This story brings to mind Candy Lightner, the woman who started the organization Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD. This woman had complained to legislators that a convicted drunk driver with a prior history of DUIs killed her teenage daughter and walked away unscathed. Who was going to listen to a weeping mother? Unfortunately, not many. Candy Lightner did not just take her grief home and cover it up. She organized a group of mothers called MAD and set the media fields on fire. She held press conferences. She passed out red ribbons. She formed support groups. She gathered statistics. She is an example of leadership in this country, an example of what one person can do. Who do you think really changed drunk driving laws in this country? A group of congressmen and senators sitting around a bar at happy hour in Washington? No. One woman and her team who decided to get mad. Candy Lightner, as with so many leaders, had to do an end run to get the job done. Notice, she did not name her group NICE. Nurturers influencing Congress easily. If you believe you have a just cause, an important message, or a key contribution to make, you will be just as innovative as a college freshman desperate to see his girlfriend 600 miles away. You will get there any way you can. Jesus was willing to do an end run. What strategies have you been using to get your message or project through? Project. What strategies have you been using to get your message or project through? Are you willing to try another way? What new approaches come to mind? Well, I thought about some approaches this morning, like all of us picketing on Highway 89 about being persecuted by locals, but that's as far as I got with the idea. We are going to have to develop a strategy, and I'm going to go back and see what our PR department thinks we ought to be doing next, because we've got to do something to stop this, right?
Let's sing to our beloved El Moria and ask him to intervene. Number 192, please give your fiats for our concerns about St. Anthony and the Christ child. The name of the light of God that never fails, I call for the victory of the God right now. Sheep for time lighting its end. Cause the position that is given to some time to this day. Call to that victory, the beloved El Moria, call to the victory now. The lightning bomb descend. In the name of the light of God that never fails, I call to beloved Linello, beloved El Moria, masters of the first ray and the great Manus, all who have their action through the first ray of God's holy will. Surround us now and intensify by the power of the mighty Elohim this presence in the earth of the community of the saints. We call to Almighty God to deliver us from this persecution and to bring all who are the persecutors into the knowledge of their own mighty I Am presence. Almighty God, deliver those who have been debased by ignorance, by prejudice, by all that is not holy. Almighty God, deliver those that they might have a fruitful life and come to know the living Savior, Jesus Christ. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and the Divine Mother. Amen. Thank you very much, everyone.